So, if you're on the webinar right now, if you want to check out in the handouts, there is an agenda for today's webinar. This is kind of just a short outline of what we're going to be talking about today, but go ahead and use this as just an extra sort of documentation of your involvement with this DRC Update webinar series that we're putting on jointly with the county. And then you can also find today's PowerPoint slides there as well in the PDF form. So, if you haven't joined us before, but I think we have a lot of familiar names on the webinar with us today. You will be familiar with myself, Jason, Rich Widerinsky, and then Chris Sandoval, who is our grant officer with LA County. And we added some new acronyms onto this list here. We've talked a lot about the statewide medical health exercise before, but this year LA County is doing a different scenario, and they are calling it the LA County Medical Health Exercise, which is going to be abbreviated as LACOMHE, because we really like alphabet soup here. So you'll see that little phrase there pop up a few more times in this PowerPoint, but I'll try to say the full name whenever possible. Okay. And so again, if you're new and you are kind of starting fresh with your emergency operations plan, this is kind of the general structure of how it will look and sort of your priorities. We talked in the last couple of webinars a lot about the hazard vulnerability assessment, because spring is often when the hospitals and coalitions come out with their new HVAs. And so we saw that with the disaster resource centers in LA County a couple months ago, and now the DRCs are releasing their response plans. And if you are on their email serve list, then you'll get this response plan, and just look for the DRC's hazard vulnerability assessment inside that response plan. And if you need to get signed up for that mailing list, just let me know, or I'll get that information forwarded to you. Again, so if you're joining us, this is sort of the problem that we're trying to tackle with this webinar series. How do we get all 364 SNFs in LA County on the same page if they're going to respond to an emergency with their healthcare coalition partners at the DRCs? And so this is sort of an overlay of where the DRCs are located. So you can see we are trying to break up all of the SNFs into these geographic areas, and really the DRCs, because of the geographic nature of the hazard vulnerability assessments, it's really important that you go to the DRC you are assigned to, whichever one is closest to your facility. And if you need help figuring out which one that is, if you maybe think you might be on the border of two, we do have some more detailed maps than this. And again, just email me and I can help you figure that out. Okay, so after the hazard vulnerability assessment sort of season is over, then the disaster resource centers, they go into updating their plans, getting ready for the annual exercise at the end of the year. But between now and then, they also do their tabletop exercises, which is geared towards that geographic area immediately around the DRC, like I was saying on that earlier slide. And so LA County USC Hospital, they are sort of the early bird there. They were the first ones to do their tabletop, and then Whittier, PIH Whittier, they just completed theirs as well. So if you see your DRC listed here and the date hasn't passed yet, I would definitely email your DRC coordinator, see if there is a way you can participate, but also just keep in mind that there is the larger tabletop exercise for LA County as well in September. So definitely try and establish that connection with your DRC coordinator, but just know that you have a couple different options, and we're going to be talking about those later on in the PowerPoint. And so, what do you do if you missed that HVA meeting? So again, if you still are looking to put that foundation into your emergency preparedness program, starting with that hazard vulnerability assessment, maybe you've done one for your building, but you don't have the one for your sort of community or your geographic area. Go ahead and still turn in your HVA to the Disaster Resource Center, even if they've already put out their response plan, because just creating that habit and that relationship of turning in that information to your sort of local coalition, that is ultimately one way you can participate in the coalition. And then you will get the HVA of the Disaster Resource Center. And their hazards might not be the same as yours, but that's okay. It's okay to show both of those HVAs to the surveyor and then just be familiar with your own top 3 to 5 hazards. Jason, did you have anything you wanted to add on that?
Not particularly. I think you covered it, but yeah, I'm assuming everybody's already done their HVA, and if they have, please submit it to the DRC coordinator for your area so that they can roll it up into that larger thing. This is it's important because you may know of some hazards that are unique to your building that maybe they have not considered. So we'd like to have the full picture, for everybody to make sure they have the most robust HVA. So.
Right, thank you. Okay, so the disaster resource centers, they have meetings that are just sort of, I believe that they're every other month, but because there's 10, there's always some sort of meeting going on. So we actually send Rich hWiderynski, our DRC liaison, to these meetings. And then he sends us back some reports. So I do not know if we will be able to get Rich on the audio. Not quite sure what's going on with that, but I did read his reports, so I'm just going to sort of do my best here. So the disaster resource centers, they're publishing their response plans, like we mentioned earlier. And the response plan, that kind of is typically like a 40-page, 50-page document, but it explains kind of from soup to nuts how a response would work in the DRC's coalition area. And that would include different healthcare sectors, including clinics, and working on getting long-term care in there. And so again, within that is the DRC's hazard vulnerability assessment. And so I know that we've talked a lot about getting that HVA from your DRC coordinator. We've talked about that a lot over the past couple months. And I was watching my email for it, looking for HVA, and they were sending out these response plans, and then I found the HVA within the response plan. So just make sure that you know, because that's something that I learned, because I'm learning with all of you every day. So the HVA, you'll find that in the response plan for your DRC coordinator. And then the LA County Medical Health Exercise, again, that's replacing the statewide medical health exercise for LA County. So that's on the same day, which is November 15th. It's a Thursday. And the scenario that LA County has chosen is that there will be multiple dirty bomb detonations in some different parts of the county. So there's going to be multiple bomb or terrorist incidents going off, and that's really designed to test the DRC system and allocating resources to where they need to go in the event of an emergency or an attack like that.
Can I?
Oh, yep, here you go.
I'm sorry,
Jason.
We're sharing the microphone, so bear with us. So the LA County Medical Health Exercise. We'll talk about the participant seminar that we that you guys should go to in preparation for the exercise this year. But I really want to just comment about the scenario. I know a lot of people think of things like terrorist events or radiological events or things of that nature not being something that you have listed on your HVAs, which we've just talked about. We understand that, but this is supposed to test the entire response continuum for the medical health community. So a lot of times we have scenarios that may not be on our top 10 list because it's something that the county or the federal government or the state wants to concentrate on. And when that happens, when we have a scenario that maybe is not in our top 5 hazards or top 10 or whatever, uh, we like to tell people that it's important to not look at the scenario, but look at the capabilities that the scenario will require you to test. And so when there's something like a dirty bomb where there could be chemical exposure, there's going to be one of a couple different responses for skilled nursing folks. And that's going to be like, we're going to shelter in place or we're going to evacuate, depending on direction that you get from the emergency responders and where the actual detonation occurred. And these are all things that we would practice regardless of the type of event. It could be an earthquake or it could be a fire or anything like that. So those capabilities that you guys are going to test when you do these exercises, that's what we need to concentrate on. And so if you go, I don't want to do a dirty bomb, it doesn't make sense, just think of it in terms of, well, it's going to give me an opportunity to test my shelter in place plan. It's going to give me an opportunity to have my maintenance guy figure out how to control fresh air from coming into the building. Or it's going to test my communication plan with the county and doing staff recall or whatever the case is. All those things can be done regardless of what the scenario is. So I know the scenario is probably not in most people's top 5s. That's fine. We're going to get to test some capabilities that are applicable across the board. So I just wanted to mention that first.
All right. So I have included this slide in our past PowerPoints, and I just wanted to point out, as we move through the year, that we're kind of now on this left-hand side of the circle where through the cycle, we're going to be doing these tabletop exercises over the end of the summer into the fall, and then we have the full-scale exercise in November. And so there are Eventbrite pages being opened up to register for the tabletop exercise with LA County in September. And then there will be another one for the full-scale exercise on November 15th. And then in December, they have the evaluation conference. So just keep those in mind in your calendar. And if you look on the agenda, which is loaded up as a handout, you'll find the link to the Eventbrite to get signed up for that tabletop exercise with LA County on September 11th. Okay, so just to kind of recap, so the difference between these exercises that we're talking about, the November one, that's a full-scale exercise, community-based, because you're doing it with LA County and with your DRC. And then we will talk about some of the different objectives of how to actually use this scenario and sort of adapt it to long-term care, because we probably won't be doing any like hazmat sort of decon sort of stuff. And it'll really sort of, like Jason was saying, come down to the capabilities of what you want to test for your staff. So again, to meet the annual requirement, you need to do a tabletop exercise and then a full-scale community-based exercise if available, and then write up an after-action report. And if you want to go back to some of our older webinars, we have a lot of information about writing up that after-action report, a lot of information about using ReadyNet to participate in the county exercise if you go back to our webinar from November. So we'll just move on here. And again, this is just an illustration of sort of the difference there. So tabletops are on the lower end of complexity, and then full scale is the sort of the pinnacle. That's when they pull out all the stops and you dress up in the gear and go through all the motions. And this is just to sort of illustrate why it takes so long to plan and kind of how we're working up towards it, why the DRCs do their tabletop exercises first. Oop, forgot about that. All right. And so upcoming events, then we already mentioned probably 5 times that September 11th date, the LA County exercise, participant seminar, and tabletops. So this is a full day event, and the first half is just kind of like an introduction to the response structure, the exercise structure, sort of the key players, and who will be leading the exercise. And then the second half, you're actually doing the tabletop. So please go ahead and register. Go to the handout, find the link there, and make sure that you put it on your calendars. Get there early because when I went last year, seating was filled up pretty quickly. So
Yeah, that's what I was going to suggest. That in this participant seminar is size limited. The room is it's a big room, and there's lots of room for lots of people. But if you can imagine how large the county is, this is the one participant seminar that you guys are going to be have access to. So go in and register now. The registration will fill up pretty quickly. It's September 11th in Santa Fe Springs, right half a block away from the EMS office in that community center there. If you have questions, obviously email Courtney and myself or Chris Sandoval, and we can give you the location. But the link to register, not only for the participant seminar, is on the Eventbrite, but also participation with the statewide medical health exercise or the LA County medical health exercise. You need to register for that, and then you need to register for the after action following that, which will be in December, which will they'll talk about the hot wash and stuff like that. So all those things you need to register for separately. So it's 3 separate events. At a minimum, you need to go to the first 2 for sure. And then if you do your after action report and stuff like that, you can certainly send that in afterwards. But those first 2, we highly recommend you guys attend.
Okay, so this is kind of just a brief overview of what that scenario for the Dirty Bomb terrorist incident will be. So the scenario, it'll start out, it'll kind of slowly build actually. So over the last few weeks, the Joint Regional Intelligence Center has been receiving reports of radioactive materials being stolen from different locations along the West Coast. And then on November 15th, which is the date of the exercise, bomb blasts are felt in different sectors of the county. First responders report that their Geiger counters, those little gadgets that count the gamma rays, are reading radioactivity in the blast areas. And then there's total chaos in the city with people trying to escape the bombed areas and first responders trying to secure the radioactive sites. So when I first saw this scenario, I really didn't know too much about dirty bombs. I've seen a lot about, atomic bombs with the giant mushroom clouds and that sort of thing. But dirty bombs are a little bit different. So we put together a couple slides just to kind of make it more realistic for you. And so we'll show you. So the scenario, they will be putting radioactive material in an improvised explosive device. And so I don't know if, at the airport they say, don't accept suspicious packages from strangers. I don't think it gets much more suspicious than this one down here on the left. That's like a trash can on a backpack. So that looks like a barrel of nuclear waste. Anyway, and then this thing here I thought was really interesting. So this was a study done by the Federation of American Scientists, and then this layout was done by Newsweek. But dirty bombs, they are sort of a favorite of terrorists because they can get low-grade radioactive material and just add it to a bomb. So this is a scenario if there was a dirty bomb that went off in front of the White House, and you can kind of see with these colors here how not only is there a bomb going off, but there's these radioactive zones, and the closer you are to it, the more damage you will get to your body. And so what's kind of scary about this is because it'll just look like a normal bomb at first. And so there'll be people rushing all around, people rushing in to help, first responders showing up. And it won't be until probably a fire engine gets there with some kind of Geiger counter on it that people will be aware that this is a lot bigger than it seems.
Yeah, in the planning stages for this type of exercise, there are the county brings in a lot of experts from fire, from public health, from environmental health talk about how they would detect that and stuff like that. All that we're going to test during the exercise. I wouldn't say everything is 100% certain, but that's why we do these tests. So you can see the importance for the responding community, how this is something that's not in their everyday line of work. Even an explosion is a pretty unusual occurrence, but one with radioactive potential will test their ability to respond to it. So that's why they're doing this particular thing.
Right, and in the LA County scenario, there will actually be, is it 4 or 5 different bombs that are supposed to go off?
Well, I think the idea is that not necessarily to do 4 as in they want 4 separate bombs, but they want to be able to test 4 different areas of the county. And if you just do one location, that really only provides the areas that are directly surrounding that the ability to participate. And so for the hospitals, they want to practice decon and triage and all those other things that would happen in an event like this. And so if we put it in 4 different places and set them off simultaneously, it will give everybody a chance to play in the exercise.
That makes sense. Okay. So after that happens, sort of your first challenge would be, what do you do? And so with the exercise, really some of the objectives for long-term care will be sort of the basic steps of activating your emergency operations plan and looking into your plan and seeing who's responsible for doing that. And then deciding, do you evacuate, do you shelter in place, and what sort of factors would make you decide one way or the other? And then what other rapid response actions could you do for a potentially radioactive emergency? So you might be able to see here that some of these questions you would be asking yourself in any sort of rapid response situation, whether or not it's a dirty bomb or a wildfire or what have you. And so that kind of goes back to what Jason was saying about testing capabilities and how it's not always about the scenario, it's about how you sort of adapt it and really focus on the sort of function that you want to test with your plan, and then sort of working backwards from there. And if you do that, you can really make any of these scenarios into an opportunity for some real learning to go on with your staff. So then these are the actual objectives that are pulled straight out of the exercise situation manual. It's still in draft form, which is why I didn't attach it as a handout here. But Jason is actually on the committee that wrote these. So this is the first one where this is almost directly from the last slide. Activating the emergency operations plan is an entire objective in itself. This is something that some people struggle with, and it's something that we need to practice more.
Yeah, and so the beginning paragraph of that just there are certain responsibilities that each exercise has to test one of 4 different capabilities, and this is one of those capabilities. But if you look down towards the bottom, the second and third bullet point, or third and fourth bullet point there, identify staffing needs, activating staff members. How are you going to do that? How are you going to notify them? Testing that part of your communication plan. Implementing your process to request resources. This is really important because most of us have not done this, thank goodness. But if you ever have, if there's ever an emergency and you need to request resources, whether it's equipment, whether it's staff, no matter what it is, this is a process that we should all be really good at, and this is how the county will respond to our requests, is through this resource request process. If you've not signed up for ReadyNet, you need to do it now. That's a given. If there are manual ways to do resource requests if ReadyNet is not available or you're not signed up. If you have questions about that and you're not on ReadyNet, please give Cortney or myself a call, and we can get you set up with ReadyNet and teach you how to do it. And then the incident action planning would be something you would do regardless of the type of event. You would just write down a plan of action and then kind of confine it to an operational period. For this particular event, we're going to concentrate on that first couple hours of activation. We're not going to extend past that, but the slides after this we'll talk about how to fill out an incident action plan. So I'll let Cortney, you can.
Okay, so what does activating your plan look like? If you check out our EOP template, there is a section in there for rapid response instructions. You can familiarize yourself with that. If you have any kind of shift leader, or maybe like a charge nurse or somebody who's on the knock shift as well, try and have somebody 24 hours, at least one person who at least knows who to call to activate it. If the administrator or the legally responsible authority is not at your facility. That's a really easy thing to do for a staff in service, to sort of introduce them or start orienting them on your emergency preparedness program. And then also the incident command structure, that sort of hierarchy thing you see on the left there, that's also a really important part of activating your response plan. If you can fill out that chart with different roles, different people at your facility, then activating your plan will go a lot smoother. Everyone will know who they report to and who is responsible for doing what. So I'm sure we've talked about NICS a lot before, but the Nursing Home Incident Command System, if you haven't heard of it before, it's customized to long-term care facilities. And you can find that on our website at cahf-disasterprep.com/NHICS. So this is the incident action plan that Jason was talking about just a second ago. This is one of our Nursing Home Incident Command forms for the incident action plan. And this is where you will kind of type up a summary of what you've been going through. I would almost do the situation summary after you do the other page of the quick start, because you want to use this chart right here to sort of organize your response for your exercise. And so obviously in a real emergency, you might not have time to do all this paperwork, but if you do it a lot in your exercises, your staff will at least be familiar with how to manage an event by objectives. They will be familiar with sort of the goals and missions of your emergency operations plan, which is always to protect the life safety of your residents and safely evacuate if you need to, or shelter in place using the proper mitigation and protection methods. And for a radiological event, that would be a lot of probably sealing your doors, things like that. But again, that is in the end kind of what you want to test at your facility. So that's probably where you would want to pull in your physical plant director.
Yeah, and just so you know, we talk about incident command. I'm not going to say yes, you should or shouldn't use it. Obviously, we think it's integral to responding to any emergency. But and for this particular thing, the incident commander is responsible for coming up with the objectives, and then the staff would be responsible for filling in the strategies and stuff like that. So obviously under the direction of the incident commander. So so it's something that can be done during an actual activation, and it should be, obviously it's not going to be the incident commander that's going to be documenting all this stuff. They're going to put that onto one of the command staff to help them fill that out.
So I made this graphic kind of fancy. So objectives would just be your desired outcomes, and then how to accomplish those, resources, and then who you would assign it to. But again, like Jason was saying, this is just one system. And then this is the rest of that form there. And so that's an example of how you can activate and then manage the event from the start. The second objective is to gather and organize the document the incident situation and maintain situational awareness. And Jason, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so situational awareness is something that frankly we're not particularly great at. And in an event like this where something, if something like this actually occurred, a real life event of this magnitude, you'd have to trust different components to gain that situational awareness. So things like Twitter, local news, things like that are a part of it. But also, how do you contact the emergency responders, and how are they sending out situational updates? How do you share your ability to be able to help those responders? Let's say you have open beds and you know the acute care hospital is inundated and they're going to need to discharge folks. What is your availability to help those people with that? So your ability to share information and to gather information is critical in this type of event. So this objective will help you test that kind of ability. Like, do we know where to get this information? Do we know how to share our ability to help? Are we on ReadyNet? Are we using ReadyNet appropriately? Do we understand how to use ReadyNet? All those things are a part of this objective. So we can go to the next one. We've mentioned this one ad nauseum, the ReadyNet. It's really important. There's on that form, you'll see a form over on the right-hand side that's a resource request. This is the one that I talked about that needs to go to the Medical Alert Center if if you're not able to obtain some of those things. But for the actual event, maybe it's something like you need a commercial air scrubber or something like that. And you go, I can't obtain that anywhere else. I'm going to send a resource request to the Medical Alert Center to see if they can help me locate one. That's an example of something you would request from the MAC. So. Objectives 3 and 4. Now, if you guys are going to participate in the exercise, you're going to get all these objectives. You're going to choose which objectives you want to use, but we don't need to go over each specific one, because if you're going to participate, you're going to do this all on its own. So.
Well, I just wanted to say, because this objective is at the point where you would decide if you want to shelter in place or evacuate, this really is where you would want to look at the scenario, because if you are close to the location of the supposed dirty bomb, then your proximity to the blast site might change your response. And so if you think back to that graphic we showed you of what a dirty bomb incident would look like outside the White House, with those different sort of radius areas with the different levels of radioactive damage, you can see how if you are 2 miles away versus 5 or 8 miles away, your outcome and your response might be very different. So again, think about who you want to activate your emergency operations plan, how you would organize that response, and then as the date of the exercise gets closer, we'll find out exactly where they'll be placing the dirty bomb scenario, and then you'll be able to see how far away your building is and be able to make that sort of judgment call there. So this objective is sort of open-ended, and you'll want to kind of adapt that the closer we get to the exercise. So here's a few other sort of tips on how do you decide to exercise on either evacuation or sheltering in place. So you'll always want to look at your hazard vulnerability assessment and decide, do I really think that my building would be ready for an immediate evacuation? Do I think that we would be ready to shelter in place effectively? Think about what you want to test your staff on as well, and balance that with what the scenario is. And then again, look at your own training program, discuss with your department leaders what you think or what they think the most challenging part of this scenario would be. Maybe they think that getting out of the building would be more challenging, and you can decide from there how you want to structure your response to the exercise. Okay, so the scenario is already sort of picked for you in this situation, so we'll just keep moving. And so as the exercise gets closer, just again, think about who in your building you're going to be pulling into your exercise planning group. Maybe you have a safety committee at your facility already, and that would be a natural place to start discussing how you want to apply the LA County scenario for your exercise. And again, the date for that is November 15th.
And I just, one of the bullet points there says roles of facilitator and evaluator and key staff. And I want to make this clear for you guys so you understand that it kind of makes sense to me that nobody from the county is actually going to come to your building and fulfill that role of facilitator or evaluator. That's incumbent on you guys to choose a facilitator and evaluator and the staff that you want to participate at your own facility. It's I've seen a lot of people say, you know what, I'm the administrator and I would normally be the incident commander, but for this thing I want to test what my backup would be. Whoops, sorry, the slides advanced all by itself. What the backup would look like, or what if I was on vacation and something like this of this magnitude happened. And then you could, the administrator could fill the role as facilitator and evaluator, and they could be a neutral party or somebody that just observes and takes notes on the how the exercise progresses. For other people, you want to do something, but it's important that you have to have somebody to do that. The facilitator and evaluator are normally two separate people, but it could be one person. You could combine the roles as well. And those evaluator notes are going to be key for your compliance, for regulatory compliance on the back end. This is a part of that information that you keep for the surveyor or the evaluator somewhere during the next year when you go through survey. So.
Yeah, and those evaluator notes are also directly what you use to write your after action report as well. So make sure you take good notes, unless you're going to do your after action report right after, just so you don't forget any little detail there. So again, conducting the exercise. So like Jason was saying, there will be a facilitator, someone reading the scenario, reading the injects and sort of stimulating that group discussion. And then the evaluator will be sort of not grading the class, but taking notes and gathering all that information like Jason was saying. And then all that goes into your after action report. And LA County actually has their own format for after action reports when you're participating in the county exercise. And I think we have a picture of that. And I actually should have made that a handout, so I will email that to everybody today that is on the webinar. And I think it'll also be available on the LA EMS webpage when you go to download all of these documents on their webpage as well. And so then the hot washer debrief, this is sort of accomplished at LA County's evaluation conference. But if you are conducting the exercise at your own facility and you've got a organized group and you've had a discussion, go ahead and do a little report out there and include all that feedback in your evaluator notes, because the after action report, while LA County wants a very short version of it because they're trying to collate, a few thousand or a few hundred reports, this is really good feedback for your own emergency preparedness program and even how you can make your exercises better too among your own staff. So documentation. So we already talked a lot about the after action report. Again, that just summarizes everything. And then you turn it into the county. Oh, here we go. So this, as you can see, the county, it's pretty much one page. I think you turn this in as soon as you can after the exercise, and they give you about a month before the evaluation conference rolls around, and they review all the results. So it's super important to get this in to them, because then when they do their response plans and things later in the year, they'll have that data about long-term care that they just don't really have right now, and we're trying to create those channels And we need your feedback for the county. So again, just make sure you get that into your DRC coordinator, or actually no, this would go straight to the LA County organizer for the exercise. And we'll have a webinar in September and a webinar on, I think, the day of the exercise in November as well. So we'll be walking you through this whole process the entire way. And I think that is it for most of our content. Did you want to add anything, Jason?
Yeah, before we go, a lot of times when we have coalition meetings and stuff like that, we talk about did anybody do any drills? Did anybody have any real life events or activations of their emergency operations plan? And I just wanted to make you guys aware that we had a facility during the last heat wave that needed to be evacuated because they lost commercial power and their HVAC system was not on their generator. They were on generator power, up and running. They attempted to cohort people into a part of the building that could keep the building cooler. Eventually, it got too hot in the building. They had to proceed with an evacuation plan. We have not heard. I have a meeting or a call scheduled with the administrator to get some information on, kind of what their activation looked like. But I just wanted folks to know that maybe we can learn from this. And I don't know if they tried this at the facility, but if you guys are in a similar or the same situation, and I realize that most people don't have their HVACs connected to emergency power. If you guys lose commercial power and it's anticipated it's going to be out for a long time, there are a number of companies within Los Angeles County that specialize in bringing out temporary cooling equipment. We've had it here in our own personal building where they have a temporary air conditioner that they bring on a trailer, and they have external ducting that goes into your existing HVAC systems, and it can be powered by your current generator, or they can bring a temporary generator to power it as well. So go through your guys' emergency operations plans. We're in the middle of summer. It doesn't, at least up here, it does not look, in Sacramento, it does not look like we're going to get any respite. It looks very hot for a significant period of time. Yeah. And so this will be something that occurs frequently, and it does occur frequently. So go through your emergency operations plans. Look to see if you have an agreement with a provider of temporary cooling. And if you don't, start doing some research and getting these folks signed up with some kind of memorandum of understanding. Get a couple people, because when it happens, there's going to be a demand for that services. But at least give that a shot before you move to evacuation. We all know that evacuation is not particularly good for our residents based on the type of acuity that they have. And evacuating them when it's 110 or 114 degrees outside is also, it kind of compounds the situation. So if at all costs, we want to try to stay where we are if we can accomplish that. So look for alternative methods of keeping cool during the summer. And with that, even though Courtney and I cannot hear Rich, I'm on the phone with Rich, so I'm going to ask Rich to go ahead and speak and give us your updates for the DRCs if you have any, and then I'll listen over the phone.
Yeah, can you hear me, Jason?
I can, yes.
Okay. Well, I was at a DRC meeting yesterday, too, for that matter, and we had the evaluation of, well, it was a desk, it was a tabletop lesson. We had 4 SNFs that were there, and we went through a variety of scenarios: hospital, how would they respond, EMS agencies, dialysis units, and then SNFs. And I was very impressed with the fact that our people, for the most part, had it together. The one thing that was stressed in all of these scenarios, whether it be a hospital, EMS, dialysis unit, et cetera, is communication. So it's a matter of having your staff practice. The issue of ReadyNet is very, very, very important, because they are frequently our links to the outside in regards to, what is occurring, It tells people our availability in terms of accepting residents from or patients from other types of settings. And so it's very important that we have everybody hooked into ReadyNet. I'd like to know, is it still about 150, 180 people we have, facilities that we have hooked into ReadyNet? And again, to reemphasize the fact that this is free, so they should be getting on, they should be testing the system regularly. Yesterday at the Presbyterian Community Hospital, we had the ReadyNet brought up on a big screen TV. And if you are a long-term care facility that has ever logged into ReadyNet, they have it recorded on the left side next to your name. When the last time you were recording and involving your staff. And it was kind of, on one hand, it was good to see that so many organizations, so many SNFs were involved with ReadyNet. On the other hand, some of the affiliations were back in 2013. So it's like, kind of got to get the staff involved and practice, because it's when something goes down, it's going to be tough. Additionally, would like to say that it's not only for the day shift, it has to be for the evening shift and the knock shift. Everybody, there has to be a couple of people who are familiar with how to work that system. And it's all about communication. And then we get back into the fact that our staff have to be drilled regularly. And that means in terms of active shooter, that's something that the surveyors are now looking at. Every time one of these tragedies occurs, the health department, it's not a rocket science type of information. They then go and start asking facilities, what would you do? So that is a drill that needs to be done on a regular basis. Obviously, this entire thing with the dirty bomb issue is as you've so eloquently said, Jason, it probably isn't going to happen. We probably didn't have it down on our HVAs. However, it's a opportunity to really involve ourselves, again, get our staffs involved. So one of the things that was discussed was at this morning meeting was if this were to occur, what would you do? So it's a matter of locking down your facility, not letting people in. If people are exposed, and you said earlier, yes, if you can shut off the vents to your air conditioning and heating a duct system, I can attest to the fact that I wouldn't know where, in the facilities that I used to manage, I wouldn't know where those things were at. So now is the time to go and make sure that you or some of your staff or your engineering staff or housekeeping staff knows where those things are, so that if something like this ever were to happen, God forbid, that they can shut those things down. Right off the bat, that's, one of the things that was brought up yesterday was, okay, if I cannot get a hold of, let's say the earthquake occurs and the towers come down for the cell phone towers, what can we do? And there is a system called the Government Emergency Telecommunications Service, otherwise known as GETS. Jason, are you familiar with that?
Yeah, Rich, we talk to folks if they've not gone through the process of getting signed up for GETS, they need to go through the process, and that just gives them priority restoration of their services in the event of a disaster.
Exactly, but at the same time, it was exciting. I'd not heard about it, and so I downloaded it today. And as you said, it provides priority ways of getting a hold of people, perhaps in the county, maybe with your staff members who you're having difficulty because the lines are so overwhelmed. And so it's a system that people should at least be familiar with and see if it will work for their facility. Because when things go down, computers are going to go down. Another issue is to get a dedicated landline. Now, most facilities have a dedicated landline, and that landline is the payphone in the building that we are, by Title 22, asked to provide people so that if they want to make any phone calls. But If you don't have a payphone, and some institutions said we don't have a payphone, we just ask the residents, excuse me, the patients to come to the nursing station and make calls that way. In that case, it would be worthwhile to get a dedicated landline, because it's expected that if the cell phone towers go down, then at least maybe, and I'm saying this, maybe the landline will be a second line of defense. If that isn't working, then you know, we're talking some major problems here, obviously, in terms of communication.
Yeah, and I actually think that's pretty common occurrence is to see during a disaster, we'll see both cell phones and landlines lose the ability to function. In Santa Rosa, they lost all commercial telephone lines, VoIP lines, cell phone lines. The only thing that worked was the wireless communication system that Comcast uses, I think, or Xfinity, they call it Xfinity Home or something like that. It's essentially Wi-Fi for a community, and that was the only way that people could call, was use Wi-Fi calling during that, with that service. So it's something that the county's aware of, and I think your suggestion to have all the facilities get signed up for GETS is at a minimum, that's the best thing that they can do. So.
Yeah, apparently it's free, and you can get a couple of cards for your building for the hierarchy. Shouldn't be only the administrator, as you know, because that person may be there during the day. Maybe you get one for the night shift supervisor or knock shift as well, because the likelihood of something happening in the daytime, well, gosh only knows, you know.
Yeah, disasters only happen Monday through Friday, 8 to 5.
Exactly, you're absolutely right. They do. We had a good, like I said, a Presbyterian community hospital. We had this desktop thing that we went through yesterday in service. Very well done. Over at Henry Mayo, the emphasis was more upon the decon, which again, now many of the nursing homes will say, well, what is decon? How can we do that? Do we decontaminate our staff? No, that's going to be done by the firemen, well, literally they're going to bring in a team, or they're going to somehow set it up so that your facility will be, or the staff, residents, whatever, will be cleaned as a result of this type of a process. So that's one thing that we don't have to worry about. We don't have to worry about having a tent to wash our staff down with, and then to do something with all of this water and all of the clothing and all of the other types of stuff. We don't have to do that. Our fire departments will do that. And so when people say decon, that's one less thing that we have to worry about.
Yeah, and that's a part of what they're going to test is who does the decontamination, what gets activated, all that stuff. So, well, I appreciate the update, Rich. Thank you very much. We're right up against the 3 o'clock hour. I want to apologize to Chris. Chris, I know that everybody else can hear you, but I can't hear you, so I don't know what it is that you would say. But I'm just going to give what I think you would say, and then we can include some of that stuff. And I just I know we have a lot of ICF providers that listen into to the webinar series, and I just want you to know that Chris is working very diligently. And I think we've got tentative approval to add ICFs to the ReadyNet system. I don't know when that will be operational, but I do know that's something that should be coming fairly soon. We're going to try to get all you guys signed up as well for that. So stay tuned for that. Hopefully we'll have an update for that on the next webinar series. So I just want to recap. Make sure you have a copy of the DRC's HVA so you have that for your surveyor. Mark September 11th and November 15th on your calendar. LA County EMS webpage has all the updates for the November exercise. Although Chris, can you let them know that the registration link on the LA County EMS webpage is not live, even though we know you can register because Joe sent out the registration links. So, and then what else do we got here?
Just one more slide. Okay. So just again, for your planning group, this is just recapping some of the things we talked about. So going over the objectives, discussing it with your planning group, and then really thinking about how your emergency response would look in your building. And then the last thing that we wanted to talk about is we were having a conference in February 2019. We hope to see you all in Anaheim at the Hyatt Regency, the Really Ready conference. We haven't had one in a few years just because it was every other year, and then Jason and we took over the department, and so it's going to be in 2019. And you can see right there, the early bird registration is going to be pretty affordable. So we really hope to see some of you there, especially the people that show up to all of our webinars. We'd love to meet you in person. And then we do have the keynote speaker already lined up. His name is Frank DeAngelis, and he's actually the retired principal from Columbine High School. So again, that's February 20th and 21st, and I think that's a Wednesday and Thursday, but it's right next to Disneyland, so I won't tell you how to plan your week. But
yeah, and I'll just say that for most of you guys, you can drive into this meeting. You don't need to stay overnight. There obviously is going to be food and beverages and things like that as a part of the conference registration. So it's really, that's about what it costs us to have a 2-day conference and pay for all the food and pay the speakers to come speak. So we'll have a number of different topics. It won't be doom and gloom. Frank DeAngelis is a great public speaker. He's got a great message about recovery after an event that's tragic, and how do you take care of your staff, and how do you take care of people like that kind of psychological first aid. So he's a really powerful and moving speaker. We'll have business continuity. We'll have instant command.
One tabletop on both days.
Yeah, we'll have a tabletop on each day. That way, if you want to go to a breakout session while the tabletop's going, you'll have the choice of doing one on either day. So bunch of good stuff planned. We did it as a part of the National Healthcare Coalition conference a couple of years ago in San Diego. This time we're doing it just by ourselves. So hopefully we look to see you there. The event registration page will be open soon. And like always, we look forward to helping you out with any of your questions, whether it's survey related or just emergency preparedness related. We're happy to help. So the next webinar is going to be on September 19th from 2 to 3 Pacific Standard Time. And then that's about it.
Yeah, if you have any questions, go ahead and enter them into the question box now. I will stay online for a couple more minutes to make sure that we have all your questions answered. But other than that, thank you for joining us and hanging in there with the audio. So we hope to see you on September 19th. All right, thanks everybody.